morning, and thank you for joining me this morning for The Way to a Wonderful Life. I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California, teaching from the philosophy of the Mastermind Jesus, the wisdom of the ancients, and the evolutionary science of mind. This program is not pre-recorded, nor is it edited. It is live. For more information about this ministry, please visit www.revbates.tv or www.revbatesontheradio.org. You can also find me on youtube.com by going to youtube.com and typing in the search box, The Way to a Wonderful Life channel. That's The Way to a Wonderful Life channel, where you'll find over 100 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also go to MSN, Yahoo, Bing, and Google and put in the search box Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, and you'll find everything you want to find out about this ministry. Now, this is a healing and teaching ministry where we go beyond religion and we focus on those simple yet profound spiritual healing principles given to us by the Mastermind Jesus, so that we can believe in our prayer and the answer to it, where we believe and we know that God responds to us by corresponding to our faith and our belief that with God, all good things are possible. With God, all good things are possible. Now, you can send me your prayer requests, your questions, your comments about this program, and you can also send a tithe, a donation, or faith offering in support of this radio ministry, which I will greatly and deeply appreciate. And you can do that from the website revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org, or you can mail those to Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. Once again, that's P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. And you can leave me a telephone message in the Los Angeles area at 818-476-0088, or in Palm Springs at 760-778-5677. Once again, this is The Way to a Wonderful Life. We're going to open our program, as we always do, with our prayer affirmation. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that this coming week we have September 11th, which is now being called Patriot Day, in which we observe and we remember all those people who lost their lives on September 11th, and we remind ourselves just how blessed we are that there wasn't more of a catastrophe from that event than what there was. And we just remember all those people who went before us and all those people that put their lives on the line to support people and to take care of people the best they could. And everyone, let's just remember all those people who have lost someone and feel their absence from that event on September 11th. And let's just recognize within ourselves that whether we're here or in the hereafter, we want to continue to believe and accept and know, just as all the great mystics and all the great teachers did, that in the spirit we are eternal. We are a spirit clothed in human form. So whether we're here or in the hereafter, even though we may feel that pain of absence, or that feeling of pain of absence of those who have gone to the hereafter, let's just remind ourselves that life is eternal and that life is God within each and every one of us. Also, this coming week, Yom Kippur begins at sundown on Friday. It is the day of atonement for those of the Jewish faith, and it's all about forgiveness. But we know that atonement, that forgiveness, can also bring us into that state of consciousness of at-one-ment, in which we realize in a fuller capacity within our mind, our heart, and our soul, the livingness, the givingness, and the forgivingness of God as it moves and flows through our mind, our heart, and our soul. So we can all participate in this day of at-one-ment, this coming Friday, beginning at sundown, with those people of the Jewish faith, and find that unity of purpose with them. So once again, this is The Way to a Wonderful Life. And let's begin our program, as we always do, with our prayer affirmation, reminding ourselves of those words of Jesus, that we are to pray believing that it is. Pray believing that it is, that we have it, we be it, we do it, whatever it is. We if we believe it is on the invisible side of life, we shall find within our own mind, our heart, and our soul that as within, so without. And we will see that prayer, that good result of that prayer coming forth into our experience, because as Jesus said, it's done unto you as you believe. So if we want more, we must believe more. To receive more, believe more. So if you're not driving a vehicle or operating something mechanical, just pause for a moment, listen for that word, that phrase, or that statement that will stir up the spirit within you. Let's begin by saying these words out loud if you can. Say them out loud if you can. The living Spirit is within me, and the Spirit of God is upon me. Let's say it one more time. The living Spirit is within me, and the Spirit of God is upon me. Let's just know together that this living Spirit within me is my life, my health, my strength, and my vitality. This living Spirit within me is my supply. It prospers all my affairs and is limitless in supplying my good. I draw on the inexhaustible substance of Spirit, which knows no limit. Abundance is my birthright, and I claim it now. The living Spirit within me is my intelligence. It guides and directs me in all my ways, ensuring that my every good desire is already complete. I acknowledge this as an accomplished fact now, right now. So I go forth today and every day in confidence and assurance, and with the positive conviction that the living Spirit of God is within me, and all is good in my world, and so it is, amen, and so it is, amen. So once again, I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, and this is The Way to a Wonderful Life, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California. This program is not pre-recorded, nor is it edited. It is live, and I want to thank you once again for joining in, and just take into your mind these words that we of spiritual truth that we go through today, and just recognize that there's something within all of us that seeks our recognition of it. There's something around us that seeks our recognition of it, that is closer to us than breathing, near than hands and feet, but we must recognize the presence, the intelligence, and the power of God as it moves through our life experiences in order for us to take that dominion and authority over those things that concern us. So let's begin to understand that it's closer to us than breathing, that in the great invisible side of life lies our power to choose, lies our power to draw forth from that storehouse of abundance that God is, that our source of all good, that Jesus said, you give us this day our daily bread. So we know that daily bread symbolizes the abundant life. So our title for our Way to a Wonderful Life message for today is, what are you and who are you? What are you and who are you? So let's look at these words from Imelda Shanklin from her book, What Are You?, which was written in 1929. She says, your real work is the building of yourself. All effort not directed that way is second to the main endeavor. Accumulated objects of monetary value are not a gauge of your rewards in the real world. Monetary values may be as distinct from real wealth as physical strength may be distinct from moral strength. Monetary values become wholly facetious when they are substituted for the wealth of the real world. Money or its equivalent is lawful, necessary, and sure when you rightly relate yourself to life. But to believe and to practice the belief that the success of your living is to be computed by your financial resources is to confuse values and to misdirect your efforts. In other words, we must realize that all is consciousness, and all is the consciousness of God around us, within us, throughout the world in which we live. That it is our ability to choose, our ability to recognize, identify with the power, the intelligence, and the spirit that created all that we see that is our real wealth. And that acknowledgement that this recognition draws forth something greater, something more wonderful into our life experiences. With all the things that we do and all the things that we are thinking about doing, most people find little time to truly think about what is most important to all of us, and that is, what are you? First of all, we must know that we are not our experiences. They are temporary. We are eternal. That the conditions and circumstances we find ourselves in are momentary. Everyone has had experiences in their lives that challenged them and perhaps even challenged their faith, both in God and in themselves. As we remember the high points and the low points of our life experiences, most of us realize that both gave us something that expanded our consciousness and our awareness of what we value and what value we place on ourselves. Many of us have identified times in our lives when, with the benefit of hindsight, we were able to identify periods of low self-esteem. Dr. O.C. Smith would tell us that whatever we have done, we did it in the consciousness that we had at the time. But he would tell us that our consciousness changes, and it does. Nothing, no single experience, no person can hold us to a consciousness that we know is not our true nature and we no longer desire to experience. As the offspring of intelligence and power and spirit, we have within us an infinite capacity to seek that which is of value to us. And our greatest asset will always be our ability to choose and to choose again and again until we find within us the consciousness of the Christ itself. That is, God within us, that image, likeness of God within our own mind, our own heart, and our own soul. This is the pearl of great price that we may experience, and we may experience only momentarily at first, but as we establish in our mind and heart the decision to realize its presence within us to a greater degree, we shall experience it to a greater degree and even greater still. And so we know that just as Jesus was teaching us how to develop our consciousness throughout his teachings, and the same goes for Buddha and for the Krishna and for all those great mystics, Isaiah, and all these people that were telling us that there's more to life than what we see. And probably one of the most important things that Jesus gave us was to judge not according to appearances. Don't judge from the physical, from the material world, because all those things can change in a flash. All those things can change quickly. It's that judging, that invisible. That's what we want to do. Pardon me. That's what we want to do, is to judge with right judgment, righteous judgment. We want to judge the good in the great invisible realm of God and the great invisible realm of that kingdom of God within each and every one of us as we partake of God's Spirit, God's power, and God's intelligence within our own mind and our own heart and our own soul, and we start realizing, having the realization that there's far more to our life than what we can see, hear, feel, taste, or touch. So let's go back to the wonderful Imelda Shanklin's book. That's Shanklin, Shanklin, What Are You? And we can read, do not resist your experiences by being ashamed when you have not known how to let God deliver you. In other words, when you have failed to generate the faith to have your prayer answered. When you say of any matter, I have not yet demonstrated, the reason for the delay is apparent to one who knows the source of demonstration. The demonstrator demonstrates himself. When I demonstrate, that I within me, that image likeness of God within me, it demonstrates itself. That self is the personal. It federates with time, and time involves postponement. So do not oppose God by trying to demonstrate yourself, your personal self. Then God will demonstrate himself. His demonstration will be of the nature of a miracle in your life. And so we realize that she's telling us that the power, the intelligence, and the Spirit of God will do for us those things that are necessary that we cannot do for ourselves. As Jesus said, it is the Father that doeth the work. And Jesus said the Father is a Spirit, and we must worship him in spirit and in truth. In other words, we must get into the spirit of trusting God and having faith in God and knowing that this intelligence that clothed us, our spirit in human form, that created all that we see, first on the invisible side of life and then through the mind of man, so much of it, and through nature, we know that intelligence knows what to do to realize for us, through us, those good things that we want. So do not oppose God by trying to demonstrate yourself. Then God will demonstrate himself, but we must hold to our faith and our trust in God so that we can have that confidence of our prayer being answered. She writes, do not resist ridicule of your confidence. Now, this doesn't mean to be arrogant, because we know that whatever it is that we pray for, we must keep it secret between us and that power and presence and intelligence that will weave its way through our body of affairs and weave its way through our mind and our heart and our soul to bring it to pass. So non-resistance will protect you from all the assaults that can be attempted by the inhabitants of the facetious world, that is, the world of appearances. It will open for you an entrance to the world of vital potentialities, the living soul and God, the living soul and God. And so here we go, and we realize that non-resistance is not new. The mastermind Jesus called us to resist not evil. In other words, that is anything that resists, anything that negates the good that is omnipresent. Yet we will not realize the tremendous benefit of non-resistance until we realize what the I within us contains. That I within us, that image likeness of God that we're created in, that we read in the scriptures and we see woven through all the teachings of the great teachers that tell us about our relationship to God, our divine nature, that part of us that is part of God. We realize that is the thing that we want to recognize more in our life every day than we ever have before. That's why Jesus could say, these things I do, and greater things still shall you do. Greater things still. That means we shall do greater things than we've ever done before, and probably greater things than we've ever even imagined before, as we put our mind on this power, this presence, and this intelligence that we call God. As Imelda Shanklin writes, spiritually, what are you? You are a soul that has forgotten its divine identity, a soul now struggling to remember in the midst of time and in the confusions of experiences that you are the living Son that is a part of the living God. How many times do we use the word I? Do we remind ourselves of this profound eternal truth about ourselves? Few of us ever do, and fewer still even fully understand the fullness of power that the word carries with it. To develop non-resistance, we must be conscious of our feelings, our reactions, our words, and our thoughts. What makes us uncomfortable? What makes us worry? What are we concerned about? Do we see the world with its great potentialities, or do we see chaos and discord? Do we see our life with great potential, or do we see something else? Let's understand the principle involved, and with this understanding, we shall realize a way in which we can draw to us the health, the wealth, the success, and all that makes us whole in the life abundant, Now, Daniel Boone Herring wrote in his book, Mind Surgery, which is an intriguing title, in 1931. This is 2 years after Imelda Shanklin wrote her book, What Are You? That man's effort to frighten us into being good, these are interesting words, man's effort to frighten us into being good has made him lie tremendously about the whole thing, for we have been taught that God punishes us for infractions of man's moral code. He writes, this is too silly to need further comment. Does electricity punish you if you get crossed up with it, or does electricity merely express its nature? Answer this, and you answer all moral questions. This shows us the power of our minds to forgive ourselves for all past condemnation. Jesus said, but to prove that the Son of Man, and that is you, has the power to forgive sins on earth, I say unto you, arise and go into thy house. Arise and go into thy house. And the man arose and went into his house, healed of palsy. This man was simply paralyzed with self-pity and self-condemnation, and this mental action had reacted into his motor nervous system and paralyzed his nerve centers. Now, so many people, they look at these healings of Jesus and they think, oh, they're miracles. Well, they're not miracles, unless you can say miracles are normal and natural to those who have faith, to those who have claimed at one moment with the power of the Spirit and the intelligence of God, and know that God does do for us what we We seek from God when we're aligned with God's nature, which is always for the greatest good, the greatest possible good ever. So we understand this and we begin to believe it in a greater way. We understand this and we begin to realize that it is not our power, but God's power that we want to draw into our mind. It's not our intelligence, but God's intelligence that we need to draw into our heart and our mind, so that our heart can feel that creativity and our mind can see the working of the law. So each and every one of us can draw to us that spirit that's necessary if we allow ourselves to believe fully and completely and trust fully and completely that this power is available to us, that it's not judging us by any way, shape, or form. It's not going to reward us nor punish us. It's only going to do what it does. This is Daniel Boone Herring tells us, and he wrote this little book in 1931. I want to read that again. Man's effort to frighten us into being good has made him lie tremendously about the whole thing, for we have been taught that God punishes us for infractions of man's moral code. He writes, this is too silly to need further comment. Does electricity punish you if you get crossed up with it, or does electricity merely express its nature? Answer this, and you answer all moral questions. So in freeing ourselves from bondage, we are to understand at once that every time we think backward, that means when we start thinking about the past and we start being concerned because somehow we've experienced some failure in our life and we're afraid that we're going to experience that failure again, or that we've experienced some rejection in our life, and so we're afraid we're going to experience that rejection again, or we're going to hope for this new promotion at work, but we're not going to hope too much because we're afraid that it may not happen. These are the things that hold us in bondage, that hold us to limitation. In freeing ourselves from bondage, we are to understand at once that every time we think backward, we are trying to get water into the jug. And what you are seeking to accomplish is to get some water out of the jug. Now, can you bring that illustration into your imagination and see what he's talking about? It's like we pour the water out of the jug and we're trying to get it back in. That's what we do when we go back to all those past things. Self-condemnation plays no part in the life toward mastery. Wow, that's a powerful statement, and we must know that. Self-condemnation plays no part in the life towards mastery. And you look at the teachings of Jesus, you find that Jesus never condemned anyone. He said, who can condemn anyone? Who can condemn anyone? Who can judge someone when they can only judge from appearances? Because within everyone is that light of God, that light of the image likeness of God, that light of power, that light of the Spirit, that light of the intelligence of God within all things. So self-condemnation plays no part in the life toward mastery. Daniel Boone Herring tells us, create new conditions. You cannot, by any conceivable possibility, redeem past conditions. So create the new. Focus on the new. Forget about the past. The past is not going to change anything. We can learn from the past, but we don't need to bring the past into the present. So create new conditions. You cannot, by any conceivable possibility, redeem past conditions. And this is why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. In other words, let that old stuff die away, because you can't put new wine into old wineskins and expect to get a fresh new wine. So this total non-recognition of the past is what blots our so-called sins and makes us, according to the Scriptures, whiter than snow. In other words, we have that transformation, that renewing of the mind. We have that refreshing of the spirit, and so we take that into our mind, and we begin to believe, just as Jesus did, that we have a one-on-one relationship with God, that we can go into the closet of our mind, go into the stillness, go into the secrecy of our mind, shut out the noise and the nonsense of the world, and what God sees in secret, God will reward us with openly, but we must take the time to do it. We must take the time to get into the spirit of it. We must take the time to learn to develop our consciousness and learn to trust. Learning to trust will make you happy, the mystical Ernest Holmes tells us. so we must do it. And Dr. O.C. Smith cautions us that whatever we have done, we did it in the consciousness that we did it in, but we are not in yesterday's consciousness today. We're not in last week's consciousness. We're not in last month's consciousness. We're in that expanded consciousness that understands and knows that right where we are, God is. Right where we are is all the power, all the intelligence, all the spirit that is necessary, because God does give to us our daily bread, and that daily bread that Jesus tells us in the Lord's Prayer symbolizes the good life, the joyful life, the abundant life, and most importantly, the wonderful life. So let's go back to those words of Daniel Boone Herring. I think this is something that all of us in the world who live in the world but don't want to be of the world anymore need to understand. This is from his little book written in 1931 called Mind Surgery. That's an interesting title. He writes, man's effort to frighten us into being good has made him lie tremendously about the whole thing, for we have been taught that God punishes us for infractions of man's moral code. This is too silly to need further comment. Does electricity punish you if you have crossed up with it, or does electricity merely express its nature? Answer this, and you answer all the moral questions. This shows us the power of our minds to forgive ourselves for all past condemnation. Jesus said, but to prove that the Son of Man, and that is you, are all a part of God, Son means part of God, has the power to forgive sins on earth, I say unto you, arise and go into thy house. And the man arose and went into his house, healed the palsy. This man was simply paralyzed with self-pity and self-condemnation, and this mental action had reacted into his motor nervous system and paralyzed his nerve centers. In freeing ourselves from bondage, we are to understand at once that every time we think backward, we are trying to get water into the jug. In other words, what we are seeking to accomplish is to get some water out of the jug, not into the jug. Self-condemnation plays no part in the life toward mastery. Create new conditions. You cannot, by any conceivable possibility, redeem past conditions. This is why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. This total non-recognition of the past is what blots out our so-called sins and makes us whiter than snow. In other words, it refreshes and renews our mind to give us that new idea, that new thought, that new creativity that will bring forth into our life that renewed faith that will give us the good results of our prayer. And so we realize that the who of who we are is dependent upon our own realization that who we are today is who we choose to be. We can refuse the joy and happiness, we can refuse the success and prosperity of the present by reminding ourselves of past sadness and past gloom and past failure and lack, or we can choose to remain focused on what it is that works for us and loose in our mind what no longer serves us. Who are you and what are you are good questions to ask ourselves, but no one else can answer them for us, for no one else's answer is worthwhile to us, because we have to know what it is. We have to believe what it is. These are questions we must answer for ourselves, and so it is. Amen. Once again, I want to thank you for being with me today. It's been my great pleasure to have you. I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates. I've been coming to you live from Palm Springs, California. You can find me at www.revbates.tv or revbatesontheradio.org. And you can also find me on youtube.com by going to youtube.com and typing in the search box, The Way to a Wonderful Life channel. That's The Way to a Wonderful Life channel, where you'll find over 100 of my radio broadcasts that you can listen to 24/7 in both English and Spanish. You can also write to me, Reverend Henry Bates, that's B-A-T-E-S, P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. Once again, that's P.O. Box 1173, Palm Springs, California, 92263. So once again, it's been my great pleasure to have you with me today. And once again, let's observe some time on September 11th to honor those who have gone before us on September 11th. And just remember, it's Patriot Day. Patriot Day. Let's honor those who feel the absence of those who have gone before us, and let's honor all those who worked so hard and put their lives on the line to save as many people as they could, and to bring that chaos into some kind of reason. So once again, this has been The Way to a Wonderful Life. I am Reverend Dr. Henry Lee Bates, affirming with you right now, right where you are. Let's say this out loud. Let's say it so we mean it. Let's say it so we believe it. I rejoice and give thanks right now. Let's say it. I rejoice and give thanks right now, right where I am, for the best of times and the best of everything. I thank you, Father, that this is so, and so it is. Amen.